Do you ever wonder how no school outside the state of Texas even offered Patrick Mahomes a scholarship coming out of high school? Or how about the two biggest schools in Texas opting to skip out on the future Super Bowl champion? No one, not Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, whatever great college coach and great recruiting staff you can think of, just about all of them couldn't see the potential in the quarterback who has now taken over the NFL. And schools that should, in theory, rule over the Texas recruiting scene like Texas and Texas A&M, well, they struck out even harder. There is a reason for all this, and in this video we're going to dive into Patrick Mahomes' crazy lack of interest in his high school recruiting journey. On the outside looking in, it sounds outrageous that Mahomes didn't have more hype in high school. As a senior, he threw for over 4,600 yards with 50 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. And on top of that, he ran for 15 touchdowns as well. So now you're looking at a good decision-making, dual-threat quarterback with explosive ability to make plays. The press sure could see it. They named him the Texas AP Football Player of the Year, and he deserved it too. He led White House High School to a district title, and this wasn't just some no-name tiny school. They had sent multiple players to big-name schools in recent years. What I'm saying is, this isn't quite like Josh Allen's story where he was coming from a small school that was known for its farming region and lack of serious football. To pile onto that, Mahomes wasn't a no-name either. His father Pat pitched in the MLB for 11 years, so from this perspective, you'd think he'd be collecting recruiting offers like a pawn shop collects coins. Or maybe I've just been watching too much Pawn Stars lately as I try to fall asleep and drown out the negative thoughts inside my head. Anyway, I should also mention just how great of a baseball player Mahomes was himself. In fact, you could argue it was his best sport. In high school, he nearly hit 500, played pretty much every position on the field, and once threw a no-hitter. That made him a top baseball prospect. And finally, he was also really good at basketball too. Like, if it wasn't his third sport, he probably could have gone D1 in that as well. So, with all this promise, talent, and athleticism, you would think everyone would be predicting a future World Series or Super Bowl MVP. Cliff Kingsbury, the man who brought him to Texas Tech, said, "I really think he's just scratching the surface as a quarterback with the time he played different sports throughout the year. When he really focuses on football the majority of the time, I think you're really going to see him take off in that position." Obviously, Kingsbury was spot on, but what in the world was everyone else thinking? Rice and Houston were the only other schools to even give him an offer. If we place ourselves back in time, we can try and understand what now seems obvious. Before Mahomes' junior year in high school, he went to his mom, telling her that he wanted to quit football. But she told him quite simply, "You're going to regret it if you quit." A lot of hype builds among prospects in their first 2 years of high school. Think about everything we know about Arch Manning right now. At that stage in Mahomes' life, he wasn't even starting as a high school quarterback. So right off the bat, he's sitting at somewhat of a disadvantage. Speaking of bats, that's another big part of this. Mahomes had entered his name in the MLB draft, and with his father having been an MLB player, that might have hurt potential football interests as well. Funny enough, side note, when Mahomes had actually committed to Texas Tech, there was actually a much more hyped up quarterback who had verbally committed to the Red Raiders. Who was that? Well, none other than 5-star recruit Jarrett Stidham. Yes, the man who was supposed to take over for Tom Brady. He later switched to Baylor, but it's just funny how things were looking back. You'd have to think Mahomes would have easily won that eventual quarterback battle, but 5-star recruits are usually given the benefit of the doubt. Sure makes you wonder. Still, back to Mahomes' recruiting. Plenty of prospects are multi-sport athletes, so it may seem tough to point that as the reason why. Mahomes' godfather, former MLB pitcher LaTroy Hawkins, he's got his own theory. He told Bleacher Report that because Mahomes was always playing these other sports, he never had time to meet with a throwing coach or attend off-season showcases. If you're not making a name for yourself by your sophomore year, recruiting staffs are going to have to rely on those quarterback camps. Even though Mahomes was playing well his junior year and was lighting it up his senior year, it was in a way just unfairly too late. Schools had already picked their targets, and those targets had committed. And even then, they probably thought they weren't missing out on much because Mahomes' mechanics were so out of whack. It looked like he was playing second base more than quarterback. And we see those exact same traits today. Mahomes has managed to use his athleticism to turn those so-called negatives into positives. After a tremendous college career, the same concerns were brought up come draft time. Crazy footwork, throws off the back foot, across the body, across the field, hero ball, bad mechanics, the same things used against him in high school. But when you look at the big picture, he's had the same success with similar volume and production at every level he's played. There's so little fluctuation, it's honestly maddening. He's been able to adjust to every level so quickly that it feels like he's sometimes still playing against high school defenses. All in all, Mahomes may have changed recruiting and drafting forever. When you look at a guy like Jordan Love, you see a raw talent, a guy who doesn't really have the mechanics of the game down, but he's athletic and can make plays. No college ever wants to skip town on the next great quarterback. Actually, let me correct that. The college football landscape of powerhouse schools never again wants to fail to offer a scholarship to the next generational quarterback. Texas Tech loves Mahomes, and they should. But from an outsider's perspective, can you imagine what he could have done with a college football playoff contender? In that scenario, he probably goes number 1 overall. And when it comes to draft scouting, no NFL team wants to find themselves in a depressed state in hindsight because they took Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes. That's gonna take more than just Pawn Stars to fall asleep at night. This was a systematic failure on the nature of evaluation. It's funny how you look at the 2 quarterbacks in the Super Bowl this year, guys who will no doubt be Hall of Famers, guys going down as what seems like 2 of the greatest quarterbacks ever, ones that will each, in all likelihood, define their era of play. Well, when you look back, they were doubted for long periods of time. They were ignored by the masses. And now, hey, it's safe to say, they proved the masses wrong. It may not seem like it with Mahomes coming from a family growing up in pro sports, but at one point, he was an underdog. And the failure to see his future greatness has been swept under the rug.